I never thought I'd be spending my 70th birthday locked in a basement. But as I sit here in the darkness, listening to the sound of my son's car pulling out of the driveway, I can't help but think about how I got here, how 15 years of quiet sacrifices led to this moment. My name is Margaret Wilson, and this is the story of how my daughter-in-law thought she could erase me from my own family. What she didn't know was that I still had one card left to play. It all started 15 years ago when my son Stephen called me, his voice thick with worry. "Mom, Jessica's pregnant and we've been looking at houses. We found the perfect one, but we're just short on the down payment." I remember the pause, the way he cleared his throat before asking, "I know it's a lot, but would you consider selling your place? We could really use your help." I didn't hesitate. Not for a second. That little 2-bedroom house on Maple Street had been my sanctuary after Stephen's father passed away. Every corner held memories. The kitchen where I'd taught Stephen to make his first pancakes. The living room where we'd watch countless movies together. The garden where I'd planted roses in memory of his father. But when your child needs you, you don't think about yourself. Within 2 months, I'd sold everything. The house, most of my furniture, even some of my jewelry. I gave Stephen and Jessica every penny, $230,000, for their dream home. A beautiful 4-bedroom colonial with a white picket fence and a 2-car garage, the kind of place where families are supposed to grow old together. "You can live with us, Mom," Stephen had said, his eyes bright with excitement as we stood in their new kitchen. "We have that extra bedroom, and Emily's going to need her grandmother around." Emily. My granddaughter. She was just 1 year old then, with Jessica's blonde curls and Stephen's gentle brown eyes. I fell in love with her the moment she wrapped her tiny fingers around mine. So I moved in, not as a guest, but as family, or so I thought. The first few years were beautiful. I'd wake up early to make breakfast before Stephen left for work. Jessica had started her marketing job when Emily turned 2, so I became the full-time caregiver. Diaper changes, feeding times, first steps, first words. I was there for all of it. I didn't mind. In fact, I treasured every moment. When Emily scraped her knee, she ran to Grandma Margaret. When she had nightmares, she climbed into my bed. When she started kindergarten, I was the one who packed her lunch and walked her to the bus stop every morning. Jessica always seemed grateful. "I don't know what we'd do without you, Margaret," she'd say, rushing out the door with her coffee and laptop bag. "You're a lifesaver." Those words meant everything to me. I felt needed, valued, part of something bigger than myself. As Emily grew older, my role expanded. I wasn't just a caregiver anymore. I was the family coordinator. I kept track of Emily's school events, scheduled her doctor appointments, drove her to soccer practice and piano lessons. When Jessica had to work late, I made dinner. When Stephen traveled for business, I kept the household running. I never asked for anything in return. Never complained when Jessica forgot to say thank you, or when Stephen came home too tired to help with Emily's homework. I told myself that this was what families do. They support each other. No questions asked. But somewhere along the way, things began to shift. It was subtle at first. Jessica would make plans without asking if I needed the car. Stephen would book family vacations without mentioning whether I was included. Conversations would stop when I entered the room, then resume with an awkward energy that made me feel like an intruder in my own home. Still, I convinced myself it was normal. They were busy, stressed with work and parenting. They didn't mean to exclude me. The changes became more obvious when Emily turned 16. Suddenly, she didn't need Grandma Margaret as much. She had friends, a part-time job, and a boyfriend who picked her up in a rusty Honda Civic that made Jessica wince every time it pulled into our driveway. Our driveway, I caught myself thinking. When had I stopped considering it mine too? Jessica's attitude shifted around this time. The grateful comments disappeared, replaced by subtle criticisms. "Margaret, could you not leave your teacup in the sink? The cleaning lady comes tomorrow." Or, "Maybe it's time you updated your wardrobe. You've been wearing the same cardigan for 3 years." I started to feel like I was shrinking. becoming smaller and more invisible with each passing day. But I pushed those feelings aside. After all, I had given up everything for this family. This was my home now, my life. Where else would I go? My 70th birthday was approaching, and for weeks I'd been hoping, dreaming really, that Stephen and Jessica would plan something special. Not a big party, just a small celebration. Maybe dinner at that Italian restaurant downtown where Stephen used to take me for Mother's Day, or even just a homemade cake and a quiet evening together. Emily had mentioned my birthday a few times. "Grandma, what do you want to do for your birthday? It's a big one, 70!" Her enthusiasm gave me hope. Surely they wouldn't forget such a milestone. The morning of my birthday arrived with autumn sunlight streaming through my bedroom window. I dressed carefully in my best blue dress and the pearl necklace Stephen's father had given me on our wedding day. When I walked into the kitchen, Emily was already at the table, eating cereal and scrolling through her phone. "Happy birthday, Grandma," she said, jumping up to give me a hug. 70 years old. You're officially ancient. I laughed, holding her close. "Thank you, sweetheart. Where are your parents?" "Dad left early for a client meeting. Mom's getting ready upstairs." Emily glanced at her phone. "I have to leave for school in 10 minutes, but we'll celebrate when I get home, right?" "Of course, honey." But as the morning wore on, I began to feel a familiar knot forming in my stomach. Jessica came downstairs dressed in a black cocktail dress and heels, her makeup flawless. "Good morning," she said, barely glancing in my direction as she poured herself coffee. "Did Stephen leave already?" "Emily said he had an early meeting." "Right." Jessica checked her reflection in the microwave door, adjusting her lipstick. "Well, I need to head out soon, too." I waited for her to mention my birthday, to say something. Anything that acknowledged this special day. Instead, she grabbed her purse and car keys. "Jessica," I said softly, "it's my birthday today." She paused, her hand on the doorknob. "Oh, right. Happy birthday, Margaret." The words felt hollow, like an afterthought. "We're going to Lisa's party tonight. Her husband got that promotion we've been hoping for. It's going to be a big celebration." My heart sank. "Tonight? But I thought maybe we could—" "You can watch the house," Jessica interrupted, already halfway out the door. "Make yourself comfortable. There's leftover casserole in the fridge if you get hungry." And with that, she was gone. I stood in the empty kitchen, the silence pressing down on me like a weight. 70 years old, and I was spending my birthday alone in a house that I'd helped buy but never truly belonged to. The day dragged on. Stephen texted once. "Happy birthday, Mom. Sorry, crazy day at work. See you tonight." But as evening approached, it became clear that tonight wasn't going to include me. Around 6 o'clock, I heard Jessica's car in the driveway. Hope flickered in my chest. Maybe they'd planned a surprise. Maybe they were just running late with preparations. Jessica walked in wearing the same cocktail dress, her face flushed with excitement. "Margaret, I need to grab a few things from upstairs. Stephen's meeting us at Lisa's house." "What about dinner?" I asked. "I thought we might—" "Oh, there'll be plenty of food at the party." She was already heading upstairs. "You should get some rest. You look tired." When she came back down, she was carrying a small overnight bag. "Lisa might need help cleaning up tomorrow, so I might stay over." "On my birthday weekend?" Jessica sighed, the kind of sigh that suggested I was being unreasonable. "Margaret, the world doesn't revolve around your birthday. We have social obligations." Social obligations. As if 15 years of raising their daughter and maintaining their household didn't constitute any kind of obligation on their part. "I understand you want to celebrate your friend's success," I said carefully, "but couldn't we do something small when you get back? Maybe just the 4 of us?" "We'll see." Jessica picked up her purse and keys again. "You can relax in the basement if you want. It's cooler down there, and you won't be disturbed by any noise from outside." Something in her tone made me uneasy, but I followed her toward the basement door. Maybe she was right. Maybe some quiet time would help me process the disappointment of this day. "Just until we get back," Jessica said, her hand on the basement light switch. "You'll be perfectly safe down there." I started down the wooden stairs, my arthritis making each step careful and deliberate. Behind me, I heard Jessica's heels clicking on the kitchen floor, then the sound of the basement door closing. Then came the sound that changed everything. Click. The unmistakable sound of a lock turning. I froze on the bottom step, my hand gripping the wooden railing. Surely I'd imagined it. Surely Jessica hadn't just locked me in the basement of the house I'd helped them buy. I climbed back up the stairs as quickly as my 70-year-old legs would carry me and tried the door handle. It didn't budge. "Jessica," I called out, my voice echoing in the basement. "Jessica, the door seems to be stuck." No response. I knocked on the door gently at first, then more insistently. "Jessica, can you hear me?" Nothing. Then I heard it. The sound of the garage door opening followed by car engines starting. Not one car, but two. Stephen must have come home to pick up Jessica, and now they were both leaving. I pressed my ear against the basement door, listening as the cars pulled out of the driveway. The sound grew fainter and fainter, until all that remained was silence. They had left me. On my 70th birthday, my daughter-in-law had locked me in the basement like an unwanted pet, and then left with my son to celebrate someone else's happiness. I sank down onto the bottom step, my legs suddenly too weak to support me. The basement was finished with carpeting and a small sofa that Stephen used for watching football games, but it felt like a prison cell. The single window was too high and too small to climb through, and there was no other way out. For the first time in 15 years, I allowed myself to really think about what my life had become. I wasn't a beloved grandmother or a valued family member. I was free labor, a convenient babysitter who worked without pay and never complained. And now that Emily was older and didn't need constant supervision, I'd become nothing more than a burden. The realization hit me like a physical blow. All those years of sacrifice, all those quiet mornings making breakfast and packing lunches, all those nights spent helping with homework and soothing nightmares, none of it had mattered. I had given them everything, and in return, they had given me a locked basement and leftover casserole. I sat in the dim light filtering through the small basement window, feeling smaller and more invisible than I'd ever felt in my life. Somewhere across town, my family was laughing and celebrating with friends, probably not even thinking about the woman they'd left behind. But as I reached into my cardigan pocket for a tissue, my fingers brushed against something else, my phone. In all the shock and disappointment, I'd forgotten that I always kept it with me. I pulled it out and stared at the screen. 2 bars of signal. Battery at 60%. For the first time since I'd heard that lock click, I smiled. They had underestimated me. After 70 years on this earth, I'd learned a thing or two about survival. And if Jessica thought she could lock me away and forget about me, she was about to discover just how wrong she was. I might be trapped in this basement, but I wasn't helpless. And by the time this night was over, my daughter-in-law would learn that you should never underestimate a woman who has nothing left to lose. I stared at my phone screen, the blue light illuminating my face in the dim basement. At first, I thought about calling Stephen, demanding he come home immediately and explain how his wife could lock his mother in a basement on her 70th birthday. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the memory of how quickly he'd left this morning, or the casual way he'd texted "crazy day at work" without even bothering to call. Instead, I scrolled through my contacts, my finger hovering over a name I hadn't called in months. Robert Martinez, my attorney. He'd handled my will 2 years ago, and we'd stayed in touch occasionally. Before I could second-guess myself, I pressed his number. "Margaret?" His voice was surprised but warm. "Happy birthday. I was just thinking about you today." Those simple words, "Happy birthday," spoken with genuine warmth, nearly brought me to tears. Someone had remembered. Someone actually cared. "Robert," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "I need to ask you something important. My will, the one we drew up 2 years ago, can it still be changed? Of course. As long as you're of sound mind, which you certainly are, you can modify it any time. Is everything all right? You sound... I'm fine, I lied, then caught myself. Actually, no, I'm not fine. I'm sitting in a locked basement right now and I'm having some very serious thoughts about my family. There was a pause. Margaret, are you in danger? Should I call the police? No, I said quickly. I'm not in physical danger, but I think I've been in emotional danger for a very long time, and I'm just now realizing it. I told him everything. About selling my house, about 15 years of quiet service, about Jessica's attitude and Stephen's indifference, about being locked in this basement on my birthday while they partied with friends. Robert listened without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds of disbelief. My God, Margaret, he said when I finished. I had no idea. When we wrote that will, you spoke so lovingly about Stephen and Jessica. You left them 70% of everything. I remember. I closed my eyes, thinking about that day in his office. I'd been so proud, so certain that I was providing for my family's future. Robert, I want to change it, all of it. Are you sure? This is a big decision, and you're clearly upset. I'm not upset, I interrupted. I'm awake, maybe for the first time in years. We spent the next hour going over the details. My estate wasn't enormous, but it wasn't insignificant either. Besides the money from selling my house, I had my late husband's life insurance policy, some investments, and a small rental property I'd inherited from my sister 3 years ago. Under the current will, Stephen would inherit most of it, with smaller amounts going to Emily and a few charities. Here's what I want, I said, my voice growing stronger with each decision. 5% to Stephen, enough to show I haven't forgotten him, but not enough to fund his lifestyle. 15% for Emily's college fund, set up so she can only access it for education. And the rest? The rest? I want it to go to organizations that help seniors who've been abandoned by their families, elder abuse prevention, assisted living scholarships, programs that provide companionship for isolated elderly people. I want to make sure that what happened to me doesn't happen to others. Robert was quiet for a moment. That's actually beautiful, Margaret, and it sends a very clear message. Good. Can you have the paperwork ready by Monday? I'll have it ready tomorrow if you want. This is important. After I hung up with Robert, I sat in the basement's dim light, feeling something I hadn't experienced in years. Power. For 15 years, I'd made myself smaller and smaller, accommodating everyone else's needs and desires. But this was me taking up space again. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, hope fluttered in my chest. Maybe Stephen had realized what Jessica had done. Maybe he was coming home to rescue me. But it was just a notification from my banking app. My Social Security deposit had gone through. I stared at the notification, then had another idea. I opened my contact list again and found another number I rarely used, Patricia Coleman, the real estate agent who'd helped me buy the rental property. She was known for working nights and weekends, perfect for someone making life changes from a basement prison. Patricia, this is Margaret Wilson. I hope I'm not calling too late. Margaret. Not at all, honey. What can I do for you? I want to sell the rental property on Elm Street. How quickly can we make that happen? Patricia's voice shifted to business mode. Well, the market's good right now. If we price it right, maybe 2 to 3 weeks. Are you looking to upgrade? Something like that, I said. And Patricia? I'm also going to need help finding myself a new place to live. Something small, maybe a nice apartment or a condo. I want to be moved out of my current situation as soon as possible. We talked for 20 minutes about market values and timelines. The rental property had appreciated significantly since I'd inherited it, and Patricia estimated it would sell for nearly $200,000. Combined with my other assets, I'd have enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life, on my own terms. As I hung up, I realized I was smiling. Actually smiling sitting in this basement prison. Each phone call was a step toward freedom, toward reclaiming the life I'd given away piece by piece. My stomach rumbled, reminding me that I'd barely eaten today. Jessica had mentioned leftover casserole in the fridge, but that was upstairs, on the other side of a locked door. I was about to resign myself to hunger when I remembered something that made me laugh out loud. Food delivery apps. I opened my phone and scrolled through options. Most restaurants were closed by now, but there were still a few open. I settled on a 24-hour diner that offered comfort food, exactly what I needed on this surreal night. When I reached the special instructions section, I paused, then typed, "Please deliver to basement window on the right side of house. Customer is temporarily unable to access front door. Will pay extra for unusual delivery location." 20 minutes later, I heard a car pull into the driveway. Through the small basement window, I could see the delivery driver's confused face as he read his phone, then looked around the yard. I knocked gently on the window. When he looked over, I waved and mouthed, "Down here." The young man, he couldn't have been more than 20, approached the window cautiously. I opened it as wide as it would go and called out softly, "I'm so sorry for the strange request. Family situation. Can you pass the food through?" He looked concerned. "Ma'am, are you okay? Do you need me to call someone?" "I'm fine, honey, just temporarily inconvenienced. Here's my card." I passed my credit card through the window along with a $20 tip. "Thank you for being so accommodating." As I sat on the basement couch eating my turkey sandwich and soup, I marveled at how resourceful I felt. For years, I'd been dependent on Stephen and Jessica for everything. Rides to appointments, help with technology, even basic decision-making. But tonight, locked in this basement, I was handling complex legal and financial matters, arranging food delivery and planning my future. Maybe being locked away from them was exactly what I needed. Around midnight, I heard cars in the driveway again. 2 doors slammed, then the sound of the garage door opening. They were home. I could hear muffled voices upstairs, then footsteps moving through the house. Part of me expected them to come down immediately, to apologize profusely for forgetting about me. But minutes passed, then more minutes. I heard the television turn on, heard Jessica's laughter at something Stephen said. They weren't coming down. They'd locked me in this basement and forgotten about me completely. The realization should have hurt, but instead it crystallized something inside me. This wasn't an accident or a misunderstanding. This was who they really were. This was how they truly saw me, as someone so unimportant that she could be locked away and ignored. I pulled out my phone one more time and scrolled through apartment listings Patricia had sent me. There was a beautiful senior community about 20 minutes away with independent living units and on-site activities. The photos showed a library, a garden, a dining room where residents gathered for meals and conversation. I could picture myself there, making new friends, reading books I'd never had time for, maybe even taking that watercolor class I'd always wanted to try. A life where I mattered, where my thoughts and feelings were valued. By 3 a.m, I'd made all the arrangements. The will change would be signed tomorrow. The rental property would go on the market Monday. I'd submitted an application for the senior community and scheduled a tour for Tuesday. And I'd done it all from a locked basement while my family slept peacefully upstairs, probably never once thinking about the woman they'd imprisoned. As the sun began to rise, painting the basement window with soft golden light, I heard movement upstairs, footsteps in the kitchen, the coffee maker starting, the familiar sounds of morning routine. At exactly 8 o'clock, I heard footsteps on the basement stairs. The lock clicked and the door opened. Jessica appeared at the top of the stairs, wearing a silk robe and looking slightly hungover. "Oh," she said, as if surprised to find me there. "You're awake." I looked up at her calmly. "Good morning, Jessica. Did you have a nice time at the party?" "Yes, it was lovely." She seemed to be waiting for something, an accusation, tears, anger. When none came, she looked uncertain. We got home quite late. I hope you weren't too uncomfortable down there." "Not at all," I said, standing and smoothing my dress. Actually, it was exactly what I needed. Very illuminating. Something in my tone made her frown. "Well, good. Stephen's making coffee if you want some." "That's kind of him," I said, walking past her up the stairs. "I'll be right up. I just need to make a quick phone call first." I walked to my bedroom and called Patricia. "It's Margaret." "Yes, I know it's early. I want to move the timeline up. How quickly can I see that apartment?" "Today." "Perfect, I'll take it." When I walked into the kitchen, Stephen was reading the newspaper and drinking coffee. He looked up with a vague smile. "Morning, Mom. Sleep well?" I poured myself coffee and sat across from him. "Stephen, I need to tell you something important. I'm moving out." His head snapped up. "What? Why? Did something happen?" Jessica froze by the refrigerator, her face going pale. "Nothing happened that hasn't been happening for years," I said calmly. "I've just finally opened my eyes." "Mom, if this is about last night," Stephen began. "Last night was just the final confirmation of something I should have realized long ago," I interrupted. "I don't belong here anymore. Maybe I never did." Jessica found her voice. "Margaret, you're being dramatic. We had plans, that's all. It wasn't personal." I looked at her steadily. "Jessica, you locked me in the basement on my 70th birthday and left me there for 12 hours. How exactly is that not personal?" Stephen's coffee cup clattered against his saucer. "She what?" "I locked you," Jessica started, then stopped. "It wasn't... you said you wanted to rest." "I said no such thing. You suggested the basement, then locked the door behind me." I turned to Stephen. "Your wife imprisoned your mother on her birthday so you two could party without feeling guilty about leaving me alone." Stephen looked between us, his face a mask of confusion and growing anger. "Jessica, please tell me this isn't true." Jessica's mouth opened and closed like a fish. It wasn't supposed to be... I thought..." "You thought what? That I was so unimportant you could just put me away like an unwanted piece of furniture?" The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Emily chose that moment to wander downstairs, already dressed for school. "Morning, everyone," she said cheerfully, then stopped. "Why does everyone look so serious?" "Your grandmother is moving out," Stephen said, his voice flat. Emily's face crumpled. "What? Grandma, why?" I walked over and hugged her tightly. "Because sometimes, sweetheart, people need to choose their own happiness, and I've finally learned that my happiness doesn't depend on making everyone else comfortable." "But where will you go? This is your home." "No, honey," I said gently. "This was never really my home. It was your parents' house that I helped buy. There's a difference." Over the next 3 days, I moved through my plans with quiet efficiency. Robert brought the new will to the house, and I signed it in front of 2 witnesses. Patricia showed me the apartment, a sunny 2-bedroom with a small balcony overlooking a garden, and I paid the deposit on the spot. Stephen tried to talk me out of it, of course. He apologized, promised things would change, insisted that Jessica had made a terrible mistake, but his words felt hollow, like responses he thought he should give rather than feelings he actually had. Jessica barely spoke to me at all, which was answer enough. The moving truck came on a Thursday morning. I didn't have much. Most of the furniture in the house belonged to Stephen and Jessica anyway, but I packed my books, my photos, my clothes, and the few pieces that had belonged to my late husband. As the movers loaded the last box, Emily ran out of the house, tears streaming down her face. "Grandma, please don't go. I'll miss you so much." I held her close, my own eyes filling with tears. "I'll miss you too, sweetheart, but I'm not disappearing. You can visit me anytime, call me whenever you want. The difference is, now when we spend time together, it will be because we choose to, not because I'm just... there." Stephen stood in the doorway, his hands in his pockets. "Mom, are you sure about this? We can work things out. We're family." I looked at him, really looked at him, for a long moment. "Stephen, You're 45 years old. You have a beautiful daughter, a successful career, and a wife who shows you who she really is. You don't need me anymore. You haven't for a long time. That's not true. It is true, and that's okay. Children are supposed to grow up and become independent, but parents are supposed to do the same thing. I've spent 15 years making myself smaller so everyone else could be more comfortable. I'm done with that. Jessica appeared behind Stephen, her face unreadable. So that's it? You're just leaving? Yes, I said simply. I'm leaving. But not the way you probably expected. She frowned. What do you mean? I smiled, the same calm smile I'd been wearing all week. You'll find out soon enough. As the moving truck pulled away, I took one last look at the house I'd helped buy, the family I'd helped raise, the life I'd given away piece by piece. Then I turned toward my new apartment, my new life, and my newfound freedom. 3 weeks later, Stephen called me, his voice shaky and desperate. Mom, we need to talk. Jessica got a call from your lawyer today about the will. She said you changed everything. She's saying you left us almost nothing. That's correct, I said, watering the plants on my new balcony. But Mom, this house, Emily's college fund, our future plans, are your responsibility now, the way they always should have been. You can't do this. We're your family. Stephen, I said gently, family doesn't lock each other in basements. Family doesn't treat each other as invisible. Family doesn't take 15 years of sacrifice and repay it with imprisonment and abandonment. The line was quiet for so long I thought he'd hung up. We can fix this, he said finally. We can make it right. No, I said. You can't. Because this isn't about punishment, Stephen. It's about finally understanding my own worth and understanding that real family, the kind worth having, would never have treated me the way you and Jessica did. I hung up the phone and sat in my comfortable new chair, looking out at the garden where my new neighbors were tending their roses. Tomorrow, I was starting that watercolor class. Next week, I was joining the book club. For the first time in 15 years, I was exactly where I belonged, and it had nothing to do with them at all.